Hello everyone. So I get this one question asked very often, mostly by school students or electronics hobbyists, that can I build a Raspberry Pi based personal computer all by myself? Well, the answer to that is a definite yes, and that too without needing any super duper technical expertise for it. And in this video, I am going to list you the basic hardware that you will require to get your Raspberry Pi computer up and running. So let's begin. Well, first and foremost, and very obviously, you will need the Raspberry Pi itself. And as on date this video has been posted, I would suggest you to purchase the Raspberry Pi 4, which as you can see here is a very small credit-sized yet incredibly powerful single board computer available at a reasonably low cost. So let me quickly show you the interfaces and connectors available around the Raspberry Pi 4 and understand the purpose or function of each one of them. To keep this video short and concise, I will cover only the interfaces and connectors that are required for the use of the Raspberry Pi as a personal computer. Starting with this USB-C socket for the connection of the power to the Raspberry Pi. Besides it, we have two micro HDMI ports, out of which you shall be using only one for the connection of the Raspberry Pi to an external HDMI display. Next to it, we have the standard 3.5mm jack or the aux connector that provides a stereo audio output for the connection to your earphones or to an external speaker. Now all computers need to have the provision of multiple USB ports, and so does the Raspberry Pi 4. It has 4 standard USB-A ports, out of which 2 are USB 2.0 ports and the other 2 are the much faster USB 3.0 ports. Next to them, we have the RJ45 socket for the Ethernet or the wired LAN connection. And for the last of the interfaces, the Raspberry Pi 4 has onboard Wi-Fi or wireless LAN as well as onboard Bluetooth circuitry too. Now let us see what add-on essentials and accessories would be required. Most important, the power supply to run the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi 4 will require a 5V DC power supply with a USB-C connector and a recommended current capacity of at least 3 amps for reliable operation. And it is to be connected to this USB-C socket on the Raspberry Pi 4 marked power in. I would suggest you to purchase the official Raspberry Pi power supply like the one I have here that has on it this beautifully engraved Raspberry Pi logo. Next, you will need a display with an HDMI interface such as this one. The Raspberry Pi 4 has 2 micro HDMI ports, either one of which can be used to connect an external HDMI monitor or HDMI display. Of course, you will need an HDMI cable for that, with one end connected to the Raspberry Pi 4, say on the left connector marked HDMI 0, and the other end connected to the HDMI display. Now to provide the user inputs, we will need a USB keyboard and a USB mouse that you can connect to either ones of these 4 USB ports on the Raspberry Pi 4. I would suggest you to use a wireless keyboard and mouse combo that reduces the number of messy cables lying around. It comes with this tiny USB receiver that would be connected to the Raspberry Pi 4 on either one of its 4 ports, and then the battery powered keyboard and mouse are both ready for use. I sometimes also make use of this palm-sized wireless keyboard and trackpad combo. It's a very portable gadget and adorably cute too. That brings us to the last of the basic hardware requirements, a micro SD memory card. Note that all models of the Raspberry Pi come without a built-in storage memory or hard drive. On a laptop or desktop computer, that would typically be a solid state or rotating disk hard drive. On the Raspberry Pi though, this storage memory is installed onto the system using a class 10 micro SD memory card similar to this one I have, that goes into this micro SD memory card slot here marked micro SD card. For the best balance between memory size and compatibility, I would recommend you to use a 32GB class 10 micro SD memory card. Also note that the Raspberry Pi by itself is just a hardware and will do nothing useful without an operating system installed on it. It is on this micro SD memory card that you shall be installing the Raspberry Pi operating system on, the procedure for which I shall be showing you in one of my follow-up videos. Now for an ending tip. It would never be safe to power up the Raspberry Pi without securing it in a casing or an enclosure. I prefer to use this official Raspberry Pi case specifically meant for the Raspberry Pi 4 and recommend you also to use the same. It's an attractive plastic casing in a cool red-white color combination with the Raspberry Pi logo nicely engraved on it. It also has these 4 rubber pads on the bottom to provide a nice grip to the casing. Well, we are done with the basic hardware requirements. I hope you found it informative and helpful. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.